Now, today I want to walk you through 5 things that quietly break presence, and I want to talk with you what the shift looks like for each one, because I promise you this, most chiropractors are doing at least one of these, and some of you are doing all 5, and you probably have no idea. Let me bring all this back to Mary Louise. She didn't tell me that I was the best adjuster that she'd ever had. She didn't say that my technique was outstanding. She said that she never felt rushed. She said that she felt a sense of connection, and that is what presence does. It makes the clinical feel personal, and that's what keeps your practice members coming back, not just for a course of care, but for life. And when they come back for life, they bring people with them, and that's how a sustainable practice is built, not through better marketing, but through better moments. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, folks. Hey, welcome to another episode of the Marketing in Practice podcast, the podcast where I have the pleasure of simplifying the marketing and the mindset so you, the chiropractor, can increase your income, your impact, and your enjoyment in practice too. Now, today, I want to talk about something that I think is quietly one of the most underrated trust moments in your entire practice. It's not the new patient visit. It's not the report of findings. I want to talk about the adjustment. Now, before we get into it, I want to tell you about a patient of mine. Her name was Mary Louise, and she said something to me on the day that I sold my practice, or certainly the last day that I worked there, that has stayed with me ever since. Now, for some background, our practice was open plan. People could see each other getting adjusted. It was often busy, very busy. There were patients everywhere. And Mary Louise looked at me and she said, it didn't matter how busy the practice was or how many people were there, you were always there with me. I never felt rushed. I never felt hurried. And I always felt a sense of connection. Now, I want that to sit with you for a moment. A busy open plan practice, other patients being adjusted around her, and she never felt like one of many. She always felt like she was the only person in the room. Now, I want to be clear about something. That wasn't an accident. It wasn't a personality trait that I was born with. It was something that I worked at deliberately, visit after visit. And today I want to talk with you about what that actually looks like. Now, most of the trust conversations that happened in chiropractic in the coaching world tends to live around 2 moments. The first being the new patient consult and the second being the report of findings. And for very, very good reasons. Those are high stakes moments. They're ones where the patient says yes or they don't. So understandably, we tend to obsess over them. We practice our language, we refine our explanations, we work on how we go about presenting our care. But here's what I think we miss. The adjustment is where the relationship actually lives, not once, but visit after visit, month after month, and year after year. It's the most repeated moment in the entire patient journey. And unfortunately, we treat it like the routine part. Let me say that again. The most repeated moment in your practice, entire experience with you, and we treat it like a routine part. Now, if trust is built through consistent repeated experiences, and it absolutely is, then the adjustment, therefore, is the most powerful trust building tool that you have. And unfortunately, most of us as chiropractors are leaving this completely on the table. Now, here's why this matters beyond just the relationship. You see, trust is the engine of practice growth, not marketing, not technique, not your explanations, but trust. Because trust is what keeps a patient coming back, and trust is what makes them refer their friends and their families. Think about the practices that grow year after year without needing to grind on new patients. They're not growing because of their website. They're growing because patients trust them so deeply, and that's what keeps them showing up, and they bring people with them. Retention and internal referrals. Those are the 2 things that build a sustainable practice. And both of them trace back to the same thing: how safe and seen your patient feels when they're lying on your table. Now, I want to introduce you to what I call the signature adjustment experience, because the adjustment is not a clinical event, or certainly it's not just a clinical event. It should be seen as a relational one. And the thing that determines whether that moment builds trust or quietly erodes it is presence. Now, presence, again, isn't a personality trait. It's a practice. And the good news is, like any practice, there are things that we can do to build it, but there are also things that we can do to break it. Now, today I want to walk you through 5 things that quietly break presence okay? And I want to talk with you what the shift looks like for each one, because I promise you this, most chiropractors are doing at least one of these, and some of you are doing all 5, and you probably have no idea. So, what breaks presence, and what are the 5 shifts that we need to make to bring presence back? Let's start with number 1. Number 1 is this. It's thinking about the next patient while you're with this one. Now, while your hands might be there, your mind is somewhere else. You're already thinking about what's coming next, the patient who's in room number 2, the phone call you need to return, the schedule that is running behind, and let me tell you this, patients feel it. Not always consciously, but their nervous system knows, because the nervous system is extremely good at reading other nervous systems. It's been doing this before we had language. And what it reads when your mind is elsewhere is simple. And that is that you're not safe enough to be worth their full attention. Now, here's what I actually did to solve this. My patients were lying prone on the table when I got to them. And the first thing that I often did with my hands resting on the sacrum was to get them to take a deep breath in. And then I'd take one at the same time. We matched our breathing. There was a physiological synchronicity that happened between us in that moment. And while I was doing that, I had something close to a mantra, almost it felt like a prayer. It was a quiet internal intention, all right? Again, like a state of prayer, that my hands and my words were being guided to give this person what they needed. And again, sometimes I just ask myself, is my mind here right now? Am I with this person? Now, that reset took just seconds, okay, but it changed everything about how I showed up, because you can't be present and distracted at the same time. You have to choose, folks. And that breath was my way of choosing. The shift I want to encourage you to try with this is, before you get going with the patient, breathe with them. Let that be your signal that you've arrived. Let that be the signal of synchronicity, okay? That everything else can wait, because right now, that patient in front of you is the only thing that matters. All right, let's move on to mistake number 2. And this is talking at the patient instead of with them. Now, educating during the adjustment can genuinely and obviously be valuable. Sharing what you're finding, what you're noticing, and what the body is doing. That's absolutely part of the adjustment experience. But there can be a version of this that becomes a monologue. And when that happens, the patient stops being a person and they start being an audience, okay? And an audience is passive. An audience doesn't feel seen. An audience doesn't feel heard. An audience is just there. Now, I want to give you a simple measurement for this. When you reflect on your adjustments, think back to yesterday and you ask yourself one honest question. Who said the most words? Was it me? Or was it them? Because if it was mostly you, that's a signal worth paying attention to. Now, this doesn't mean for one moment that you should be silent. I certainly never was. It means that the adjustment should belong to them and not to you. Now, here's something that I noticed over the years. Patients would often ask me how I was going. They wanted to know about my life, and it's natural. We love to talk about ourselves. We all do this. But presence means resisting that pull. You know, we want to give them a genuine answer, and then we want to return the conversation back to them. Now, maybe it is asking about the symptoms, not always, but maybe it's just checking in about the stresses at work or how things have been going with the family, okay? Those questions might seem small, but what they communicate is enormous. They say, I remember you. I've been thinking about you between visits. You matter to me beyond this room. And when a patient leaves an adjustment feeling heard, not just adjusted, that's the signature adjustment experience at work. Now, I looked at every single adjustment as an ongoing conversation. Now, sometimes there was a week or 2 between conversations. Sometimes it was longer, okay? But I looked at it as though we were just having an ongoing conversation that often lasts for years. And when you see it that way, the adjustment isn't just a clinical transaction, it's the next chapter in a relationship. So the shift I want you to think about is this. After your next adjustment, I want you to ask yourself honestly, who said the most words? And if it was you, then good, you noticed, because that's where the things begin to change. All right, mistake number 3, and this is confusing autopilot with flow. Now, this one is a little bit more nuanced than the others, and I want to spend a little bit more time here because I think this can be one of the most misunderstood points on the list. There's a difference, gang, between mindlessness and mastery. Now, those two things, though, can look identical from the outside because both involve hands that move without being told. Both feel automatic, but they are completely different experiences. And your and my patients feel the differences, even if they can't name you. Now, let me introduce you to a thinker whose work I find genuinely fascinating. He's a psychiatrist and a neuroscientist, and his book, The Master and His Emissary, makes a case that has stayed with me for a long time. Now, McGilchrist argues that there are two hemispheres in the brain, and they don't just process information differently. They have a fundamentally different relationship with the world, okay? Let me go a little deeper here. The left brain is the one that categorizes, it sequences, and it manages. It's the brain that's running when you're going through a protocol, checking your technique, tracking your schedule, managing the noise in the room. The left brain is useful, we need it, but it keeps you at a distance from the person in front of you. It processes the patient as a problem to be solved, not a person to be met. Now, the right brain is something entirely different. The right brain reads relationship, context, and tone. It perceives the living whole of another person. It's the part that walks into the room and immediately feels energy. It's the part that knows something is wrong before anyone says a word, okay? The part that picks up on what isn't being said. Now, McGilchrist's argument is that we've become a culture dominated by the left brain processing, analytical, fragmented, and transactional. And this happens at the cost of the right brain's ability to perceive the whole. Now, apply that to the adjustment room. When you're on autopilot, you're in your left brain, okay? The hands are moving, but you're not really there. You're managing the process. But when you're in flow, something very different is happening. It's the state where noise falls away, where time disappears, where your hands know exactly what to do without being instructed, where you're finding stress and tension in the spine faster and more accurately than you could by thinking your way through it, where communication becomes heart to heart. Now, most of you have probably experienced this. I know I certainly have as well. And if you've been practicing for long enough, you've probably experienced it several times. It's that feeling where everything is effortless, where you and the patient are genuinely in sync, where there's a resonance happening between two nervous systems. And that goes beyond anything that you could manufacture consciously. Now, this is not mystical. This is right brain to right brain communication. And it's what your patients are responding to when they say they felt something they can't quite explain. Now, here's the problem. Autopilot feels a lot like flow from the inside. The hands are moving, you're not having to think, but the quality of attention is completely different. Autopilot is absence. Flow is presence, okay? Autopilot is boredom wearing the mask of efficiency, and flow is attunement. And the difference between them, okay, is what your patient feels on the table. Now, the good news is this. The breathing technique that I described in number 1 isn't just a way to arrive mentally. It's a doorway into right brain function. When you slow down, match the breath, drop into that moment, you're shifting from left brain management into right brain attunement. You're moving from processing a patient to being with one. Now, the shift I want you to think, the goal is not to be thinking more during the adjustment, okay? It's to think less, but it is to feel more. This isn't about being less clinical. It's about being more present, because that's where the real magic of the adjustment happens. All right. Okay, let's move on to mistake number 4, and that is letting the environment work against you instead of for you. Now, most chiropractors think about the environment as something that happens to them, okay? The noise, the interruption, the open plan, the CA that needs something, the phone that's constantly ringing, and they try to manage it through willpower, through focus, through gritting their teeth and trying to tune it out. But here's what I learned over time. The environment isn't something to just manage. It's something that you need to deliberately design. And one of the most powerful tools I had in my practice was music. Now, my staff used to laugh at me about this because the playlist that I wanted constantly changed. All right. Some days it was soft yoga style, it was meditative. And other days I needed more energy to it. It was electronic, it was some beats, it's something that actually moved. Now, that choice wasn't random. I was reading where I was on that particular day. If I came in feeling a little bit flat, a little low energy, okay, I wanted something to lift me up. If I was scattered or wide, I wanted something to slow me down and to settle me. Because presence for me wasn't a fixed state that I arrived at the same way every morning, okay? Some days I needed to be lifted and some days I needed to be quieted down. Now, the environment can serve either function. Now, if you're paying attention to it, you can find out what you actually need. So the first part of this shift is for you to be proactive. Do an audit on your environment. What is it that you can actually control? Things like the music, the lighting, the visual noise. What are the things that pull your eye or your ear when you're trying to be present? Now, most chiropractors have never thought about this deliberately. They just take the environment as it comes. But every element in your adjusting room is either helping you show up or it's making it harder. Now, the second part of this shift is sometimes something that can be a little bit more uncomfortable because there's a specific type of distraction that I want to name. And that's when you find yourself listening to what's happening at the front desk. You've got half an ear on how they're answering the phone. You're monitoring how a conversation is going. You're mentally stepping out of the adjustment room to check in on what your team is doing. Now, I've done this many a time, and I know exactly what it feels like. And here's what I've come to understand about it. This distraction is not a focus problem. Again, it's a trust problem. When you cannot let go of what's happening at the front desk, it's because part of you does not fully trust that it's being handled. And this is important information, not about your focus, but about your team. Because the solution to that distraction is not more willpower, it's training and the standards that earns back your trust, so that when you step into the adjustment, you can genuinely let go because you know that things at the front desk are being handled. Now, you cannot afford to be half present with the patient and half managing the practice at the same time. Your patient deserves all of you, and so does your team. The investment is making sure that you get this right, and this investment pays off every single time that you step into the adjustment room. So the shift I want you to do here is audit your environment deliberately. Design it to support presence, not to fight it, okay? And where you find yourself distracted by your team, treat that as a signal, not a focus problem, but as a training opportunity. What is it that you need to clean up? Okay, let's move on now to our fifth and final mistake. And this is going into the adjustment to be liked instead of leading. Now, this might be one of the more uncomfortable points on the list because it looks like warmth. It can feel like care, and it comes most often from a really good place. Now, most chiropractors who do this do it because they genuinely care about people, but there's a version of wanting patients to be happy that tips into neediness. And neediness is not what your patients need from you. When we walk into the adjustment room, trying to please, trying to make sure that they like us, checking whether they seem satisfied, monitoring their reaction to everything we do, that energy comes across and it repels. Not because the patients don't want warmth, they absolutely do, because the energy has an anxious energy about it. And anxious energy does not create safety, it creates the opposite. Okay, think about it from the patient's perspective. They come to you because something isn't right, okay? They're feeling vulnerable, they're uncertain, and they need to feel that the person working on their spine is steady, is certain, not looking to them for reassurance. Your patients don't need you to need their approval, okay? They need you to know what you're doing and to lead them through it with confidence. Now, I want to be clear. This is not arrogance, folks, I'm talking about. It's not coldness. It's not indifference to how they feel, okay? It's the quiet certainty of somebody who is here to serve, okay? And somebody who doesn't need anything back from the patient in that moment. Now, There is a version of warmth that comes from this strength, and that's the version that builds trust. Let me say that again. Patients don't need you to be liked. They need you to be certain. And here's the shift I want to leave you with, okay? It's not about walking in and asking, what is it that this patient needs? Because even that question can come from a subtle sense of searching, and searching is neediness in disguise. So the shift is this. It's all about us walking into the adjustment room already knowing that your hands are going to find what needs finding, knowing that your adjustment is going to give the body what it needs to heal, and knowing that you are going to deliver something of real value, regardless of what this visit looks like, regardless of how the patient seems, and regardless of whether they say thank you or say nothing at all. You're not there to find out what they need. You're there to deliver what they need. And you already know how to do that, okay? There's certainty, okay? There's a quiet confidence. And that's what your patient feels when you walk into the room. That's, gang, what creates ultimate safety, and that's what builds trust. And it's the energy of a practitioner, of a chiropractor who is truly there to serve. All right. Let me bring all this back to Mary Louise. Now remember, she didn't tell me that I was the best adjuster that she'd ever had. She didn't say that my technique was outstanding. She said that she never felt rushed. She said that she felt a sense of connection. And that is what presence does. It makes the clinical feel personal, and that's what keeps your practice members coming back, not just for a course of care, but for life. And when they come back for life, they bring people with them. And that's how a sustainable practice is built, not through better marketing, but through better moments. Now, I also want to be honest with you about something. I was able to do all of this in 4 to 6 minutes. I wasn't spending 30 minutes with every patient. I wasn't doing anything dramatic or elaborate. I was just there, and I was there fully. And that's available to every one of you listening or watching this podcast right now. In your next adjustment. The adjustment isn't just a routine part of your patient's journey, it's the relationship part. And every visit is a chance to either deepen that or to let it drift. So here they are again, the 5 things that break presence. The first is this, thinking about the next patient while you're with the one in front of you. The second one is talking to patients instead of with them. The third is confusing autopilot with flow. The fourth was letting the environment work against you instead of for you. And the fifth one was going into the adjustment to be liked instead of to lead. Now, what I want to encourage you to do is just pick one of these, just one, and bring it into your next adjustment. All right, folks, that's it for today. Thanks for all that you do. Keep saving lives, and I look forward to seeing you back here next week. Bye. If you've enjoyed listening to this podcast, you have to come and check out my Community Influencer Program. It's my monthly coaching program where we take all this material and I'll work with you to help you apply it, implement it, and systemize it. The Community Influencer Group Coaching Program is designed to help you increase your practice income, impact, and enjoyment. Join me over at anguspyke.com/join. That's anguspyke.com/join. I'd love to see you there.